and she kept a journal full of scabs. Man, never read anything like that before. They get their extraterrestrial freak on. I have read some weird stuff this year. Okay, hello creeps, Andy here, and today I am going to rank for you every book that I have read this year, minus the thrillers, because I did those separately. But these are the remaining, I don't know how many books there are, but there's quite a few. So we're just gonna jump on in. First, I'm gonna tell you a list of books that are like unrated. They're unrateable. They're just, I can't rate them. And then after that, we're gonna go from my least to my most favorite book that I've read this year. Again, as always, just because a book isn't for me doesn't mean that it won't be for you. Just because it's low on my list doesn't mean that I'm discouraging you from purchasing it. I'm just giving you my own opinion. There's a lot of books here, so I'm just gonna give you a really quick synopsis on them, and that's it, and then move on. So I'm very excited actually. Let's start with the unrateable books. These aren't in any particular order, and honestly, they're just a lot of different types of books. So the first one is The Myth of Sisyphus. This is by Albert Camus, and we're still early on in the video, so I'm gonna have to be careful with what I say. But this is honestly just a book of Albert Camus discussing taking one's own life. And it's just kind of his meditations on that. It's not really a book that you can rate. It's not fiction. It's just like a thought process of his different thoughts. So it was really interesting to read, but not one that I could rate really, you know? But yeah, it was interesting. He's was a French philosopher, so there's a lot of philosophical stuff in there. There's a lot of talk of literature. It was interesting. These ones I put as unrateable too. I did rate them, but like Taken by a Pterodactyl, Unhinged, and oh, that Chuck Tingle book. These are erotic literature books that I've read for a different video. Oh, it's called Pounded in the Butt by My Sentient Library Card, who seems otherworldly, but in reality is just a natural part of the priceless resources our library system provides. I'll leave that video linked down below in case you're interested. But all of these, I don't know if I ranked them or not, but they're just, yeah, they're not books that I can really rank. A lot of them are silly. Unhinged was about a sentient door that becomes a lover to this girl who lives in the apartment behind the door that he guards. And Taken by a Pterodactyl, I think that one's a little self-explanatory. The next one here is Irene's. This one, I still can't tell you what it's about. I think it's about a man who goes to pay for an exchange of intercourse with somebody. I believe he gets syphilis, and I believe that the rest of the book is just his non-coherent ramblings dealing with syphilis. Syphilis? Syphilis. Why does that sound so weird? Am I saying that incorrectly? Syphilis? Anyways, I don't even know for sure if that is the plot of the book. That's what I think it is. It's a very weird story. This is the next one. Oh, that one was by Louis Aragon, I think. This is by Urs Ullmann. This is another one. I think I did rate this, and I think I did rate it 4 stars because it was just an interesting book. But like, how do you rate a book like this? This is about someone who may or may not be doing this. Again, it's more of like a philosophical text, and it's a trip. It's a trip to read, but it was really interesting. I did like reading it and trying to analyze it and pick apart what it could potentially be about or what it meant to me. So I really enjoyed it. It actually it's from a Swiss experimental writer, and it did win some prestigious awards and stuff. So it's, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so here we go. Now, those were my, how the heck do I rate these books? These, they're not really separated into, I mean, they're separated into categories, but I didn't name them. I didn't do anything fancy because we have a lot to talk about. These are books that probably weren't for me. The first one is called Splash Squatch. This is by Whip Slorp. And I bought these books because I will do another video on them. They're called Chill Pimples. So they're like, yeah, well, you'll see in that video. This one was about 2 men. I can't even remember if they're friends. I think they're friends. And then one of the guys, they go to this lighthouse where one of the guys had a relationship with this other man who got taken by a splash squatch. Sasquatch. And honestly, I thought at the very end, at least he was going to get it on with the splash squatch, but it turned out to be a little bit disappointing. And also there are just so many grammatical errors in this guy that it was just, yeah, not for me. The next one, Joe Nesbo's The Night House. This one was my first Joe Nesbo book, and I know some people really love his writing, so I will definitely read more of his work, but this one was not for me. It's split into 3 sections, and at first it's about a kid whose friends get sucked into a phone, and then he ends up going to this mental institution because no one believes him, and then the third part of the story is him returning to the town as an adult and some weird stuff happening, and it just was not my favorite book. It felt like a whole bunch of weird stuff put together, and I just didn't really enjoy it. The next one was Irene Idleslay by Amanda McKittrick Ross. This is labeled to some as the worst book in the history of literature, and I have a video on this one too, so I'll leave that linked down below. But this is about a woman who leaves her husband because he locks her in a room forever, and then she just gets punished, and the moral of the story is like, well, she should have been nice to her husband even though he locked her in a freaking room for a year, and then she escaped to be with a guy that she really loved, and then she decided she didn't like him anymore. This one has a lot of those purple prose, or purple patches I guess they call them, paragraphs in them where it's so over descriptive you don't even know what's going on, but I mean the general story made sense. Okay, next category. Next up, we have Susan Grant's How to Lose an Extraterrestrial in 10 Days. This is an erotic extraterrestrial love story about a woman who meets a man who tried to assassinate her brother-in-law, and then she falls in love with him. It's because he was taken from his planet and made into this kind of machine, but then once he came to Earth, they took that part out of him so he could just be a normal person anymore and not like a killing machine. And then they fall in love and they get their extraterrestrial freak on. Every time I film these videos, I think, I have never said that sentence before in my life, and I really enjoy doing this. So thank you for watching me say the most ridiculous stuff. But anyways, this one was like, it was fine. I mean, it was actually kind of a cute story. I didn't hate it. I thought I was gonna hate it. I wanted to hate it. I didn't really hate it. It was fine. It was cute. I mean, it's still not my type of story. I'm not a really big fan of extraterrestrial romance novels, but if you are a fan of them, it was well written and fine. The next one is My Vagina Smells Like Sulfur. I have read some weird stuff this year. Okay, this is by C. Commissar, and this is an extreme horror novel about a woman who is the host of these snuff film things on the dark web where, well, they do different things. They harm people and stuff, but then they also want people to send in videos of themselves offing themselves, but then they find out that that's not a great idea because then they lose audience members. And then you have this additional aspect of people in the company and what happens with them. I mean, the title, come on, it's so catchy. How could you not read that book? But not my favorite extreme horror book, but I would still read more of them. Next up, I read Hi, I'm a Social Disease. This was by Anderson Prunty. This one was just a group of short stories, and so it was the first thing I ever read from him. Sometimes it's hard to know how to feel about a writer when you just read short stories, because there are some really neat ones. The first one was about, it was like a post-apocalyptic world where this man lived in this place, and then there was a woman there and he was interested in her, and she kept a journal full of scabs. Just some really interesting imagery. Then there were other stories that I wasn't too fond of, but I would definitely read more of his work for sure in the future. The next one is Camp Damascus, and this one was again by Chuck Tingle, and this was his first serious book, you know, because he writes all those erotic literatures with the fun names. And so this one was more of a serious book about a young girl. Weird stuff starts happening to her. She starts spitting out flies and seeing things. I don't want to give too much away because the description is kind of vague, but she starts seeing things and thinking things are weird. She lives in this town, and it's associated with this gay conversion therapy camp. So it's just like her exploration of like what's going on in the town and stuff. Pretty sad story, heartbreaking at times. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff of just how some of these parents have conditional love for their children was really heartbreaking, but it doesn't villainize religion, which I really did enjoy. So there were aspects I really enjoyed about it, but the core supernatural stuff, it just honestly wasn't a story for me. However, he does have a new book that just came out that I will be reading, so we'll see how that one is. But yeah, some supernatural stuff, it's just kind of hard to get me into. And here is The Hollow Dead. This is by Darcy Coates. This is Gravekeeper number 4 in the series. And this is a story about a young girl who wakes up in the woods. She doesn't remember who she is, but she knows that there are people after her. So she runs to this town, ends up befriending people, and she becomes the Gravekeeper. And oh, she can speak to ghosts. So she tries to help the ghosts in the town move on to the other side. And it's just over the past 4 books, just her trying to figure out who she is, where she came from, what those abilities are, blah blah blah. This one, I thought it was going to be the final one, and it's definitely not. There will definitely be more of them, but whereas each book before had very specific ghosts that she tried to help turn over, this one was more broad, and there wasn't as much, I mean, like, there was just so much going on in here, and I felt like it just wasn't as satisfying as the other 3 books that I had read, because those were more slower paced. I don't know, I liked the in-depth stories of each ghost, and this one was on such a larger scale, and some of the stuff I was like, oh, that just, it was kind of resolved easily, and I felt a little dissatisfied with that one. Next up, we have The Bad Seed. This is by William March. This was a good book. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad that I read this one. It was really entertaining. I will be watching the movie soon. But this is about this evil little girl. She's the bad seed. And her mom is kind of coming to terms with the fact that there's something off about her daughter, but she's also a protective mother. And so I feel like she plays dumb a lot in it. There's a lot of mention of psychology and other stuff going on, so it is an interesting read. However, it feels old. Like, sometimes I can read books from the 30s and they feel like they were written yesterday, and then sometimes I read books from, like, when was this published? 1954. So it was published the year he died? This fool was born in 1893. Dang, that's crazy. Okay, but anyways, sometimes you read books that were published in the 50s and you're like, this was published in the 50s. Do you know what I mean? So this one felt a bit older. Anyways, still glad I read it. Still an interesting book. Little girl's creepy. There's some cool characters in there, but it did feel old at the end of the day. Next is A House with Good Bones. This is by T. Kingfisher. This one was difficult to place because it's a cool concept. I really enjoyed the writing, loved the main character, want to be best friends with her. She's like I think she's an archaeologist, or maybe she does stuff with bugs. I can't remember exactly, but she has a lot of knowledge of bugs and bones and things like that. She ends up moving back home, and her mom is convinced that the house is haunted. She thinks her mom's kind of losing her mind, and then they go on this whole adventure of what is actually going on. And the thing is, a lot of really cool concepts in here, a lot of themes I really enjoyed. There's a lot of this book that I liked, but it did lean more towards fantasy. Like, when you get into flower people, I've tapped out, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, my own personal opinion. So if you like fantasy and horror, I really would recommend her work, because I think a lot of it is kind of like that fusion. No, this is the next one, or now I've gotten confused. I don't know if this one was supposed to be before or after, but I'm confused where I am. Okay, I think this is the order. Man, now I don't know. But this one was Skin. This is by Audrey Rush. And this one was kind of like an extreme horror erotic fusion. And I think that her writing leans more towards the erotic, but this one just happened to be more horror based. And I think she has kind of subgenres of erotic fiction. So anyways, this one was about a man who's he does taxidermy, and a woman brings him her daughter and wants him to taxidermy her, and he knows that he shouldn't, he knows it's illegal, he knows he should just turn her away, but he's intrigued by the body, so he's creepy as all hell. And yeah, the story is just what ends up happening with the body and other people, and it's gross. It gets pretty gross. Yeah, there's some of the stuff in there I was like, oh, Okay, like, well, maybe I won't go into it. But anyways, yeah, pretty dark, pretty gross. Okay, next on my list, so go this way, then this way. Man, I really should have written better instructions, is Murder Road by Simone St. James. I've really liked her books in the past because a lot of the time you have kind of this mystery and then the supernatural ghost stuff takes a back seat to it. So it enhances the story, but it doesn't overwhelm the story. With this one specifically, it is just a ghost story. There is nothing other than supernatural about it, which isn't a problem for a lot of people. They enjoy this kind of stuff, but I'm just not huge on ghost stuff. I mean, it's really got to be a good book and something really unique to get me intrigued by it. And this one was fine. There was nothing wrong with it, but it just wasn't for me. Oh, it's about a man and a woman who are going on vacation? Oh, they're going on their honeymoon. Okay. They end up picking up a hitchhiker, and when the hitchhiker passes away, they are now forced to be involved in the investigation of who this girl was, what happened to her. It seemed like someone was chasing her, so they kind of insert themselves into this girl's story and try to figure out what was going on. Next, I have The Black Farm. This was by Elias Withrow. And this one is about a guy who offs himself. They end up waking up thinking that that'll be the end, but they wake up kind of in this purgatory, I suppose you could say. And there's some gnarly stuff in here. I wouldn't call it an extreme horror book, but there are definitely some extreme stuff that happens towards the beginning of the book and towards the end of the book. Like more extreme than a typical horror book, but maybe not fully an extreme horror book. But yeah, there's some definitely, I mean, this one I gave points for originality. Like I've never read anything like that before. Some really interesting concepts in there, and I would read more of his work. Yeah. The next one was James Herbert's The Fog. It's about this fog that comes in, and whoever is in the fog gets affected by it. It kind of makes them lose their mind, and they end up harming themselves, harming other people. And so a lot of the book, you just are brought along with these individual stories, but it's kind of weird because you'll have 10 pages of a story for one particular person, and you know they're just going to get killed off anyways, and then that happens over and over and over again. And so I really enjoyed the stories, but I really liked more the ones that kind of wrapped back around and came up later, because otherwise it's like, this is cool, but also why am I reading about this? Because I know they're gonna meet their end anyways, you know? But I did enjoy reading the first half of the book. The second half, I would say there's about 100 pages of just the government trying to capture the fog, which was definitely less interesting to me than the other stuff. So yeah, this one was like, I liked it, but there was stuff that wasn't my favorite in it. Okay, let me go grab the last few categories of books and then we'll continue. Okay, I also will say now, a lot of the books that are on the lower end, it's probably a little skewed because I have read some phenomenal books this year. The rest of these books are like unbelievably amazing, great books that I really, really enjoyed. The next one I read is We Can Build You. This is by Philip K. Dick, and this is about this company. They're making pianos, I believe they're making pianos, and they get the idea to start making robots instead. And instead of just making a generic robot, they end up making Abraham Lincoln and Edwin M. Stanton and giving them the information of these characters. Or of those real life people. So they are robots with the knowledge of the people that they are portraying. Then you have this additional kind of billionaire person that gets mixed up with them, and they don't know if they're doing the right thing by creating these robots. There's really interesting conversations between the robot and the human, like what it is to be a robot, what it is to be human, and yeah, it's an interesting read. Not my favorite Philip K. Dick book, but still definitely worth the read, I think. Next up, yeah, I mean, some great books. This is Monstrilio. This is by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This was his first book, which is really impressive. So at its core, this book is about two separate things kind of mixed together, which kind of threw me off because the back makes it seem like after a mom loses her kid, it says that she cuts out a piece of his lung to save for herself. And then that lung ends up growing into this creature that she treats as her own child. And so on one hand, it's this kind of messed up portrayal of grief and what it does to you. And I really loved that. But there's also an additional aspect of the story of like sexuality and coming into terms to who you are, and that's fine, but they're both mixed up in this monstrilio monster. And so that kind of confused me a little bit. Like, I do believe the hunger of the monster is more of a portrayal of like their sexuality and who they're attracted to and wanting to be with who they want to be with than it is about the loss. And so yeah, I don't know, it was kind of a weird, unique intertwining of those two subjects, one of which I really connect with and the other not so much. So, you know, it was still an interesting read. I will absolutely read more of his books in the future if he writes them. But yeah, interesting nonetheless. Next up here, we have the new Chuck Palahniuk book. This is Not Forever, But For Now. This one came out, I can't remember, either this year or last year, but it's his newest book. And wow, is this one a ride. So you're reading this book and it's weird. It's about these brothers who have a go with each other, if you know what I mean. And it's about the family business and the grandfather wanting them to take over. And then you have these weird celebrity things mixed in there, like how this family business is intertwined with celebrities and bad things that have happened to them. It's an odd book. They also have this tutor who's obsessed with like inflatable dolls, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on here. So I could get why this one won't be for everybody. However, when you get to the end and you read what the book is about for Chuck, why he wrote the book, you really do get to sit back and be like, oh, that's why this and this and this, and you kind of connect the dots, and it gives you, I think, a cool experience to read, and I really enjoyed that one, but it won't be for everyone, I can promise you that. The next one is 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Bazterrica. So this is the author of Tender as the Flesh. These are just a bunch of short stories, and man, there's some great short stories in here. There's some really cool stuff. I read this one a while ago, so I don't really remember any specifics, but I do remember there's some really, really cool short stories. I remember highlighting a lot of stuff in here, just great one-liners. These were just original. She really does surprise me with her writing. I think that she is a really impressive modern day female horror writer. I really love her work, so I really enjoyed that one. I'm sorry I can't remember individual stories, but I do remember that I really liked most of them. I mean, some really, really cool original stuff in there. Next, I read Closer by Dennis Cooper. This one is about a young man named George Miles, and it's kind of him trying to connect with other people and other people just kind of using him for their own benefit, and them being kind of too mixed up into their own world to really truly care for him. It was a really interesting read, first Dennis Cooper book I ever read, and I'm excited to read more in that series because I think there's quite a few. Next, I read Ronald Malfi's Bone White. This was another fun book. It's about a man whose twin brother goes missing in this remote Alaskan town. He has no knowledge of what happened to his brother, nothing, but then he finds on the news that there is a man from that town that has come clean and admitted to murdering a bunch of people and burying them in these graves. So he takes police over and shows them where the graves are. So the first brother, I think that his name's Paul, he ends up flying out to the town convinced that one of the graves will hold his brother, and he ends up finding much more than just the answer to that question. He ends up getting kind of involved in the town and learning how weird it is and how the whole town is built on this lore. And yeah, it's a really, come on, it's Ronald Malfi. It's a good book. Next up here, I have In Their Arms by Thomas More. Oh, I loved this book. This is another one, like, it's pretty sexual. There's a lot of sexual stuff going in here, but this is just about a gay man and his very surface level relationships with other men. I don't know, this book, it was so freaking interesting, and I'd really like to read more of his stuff. It was a really interesting story of just this man going along trying to find hookups and just people to sleep with. Like, he's not really trying to find connection. He ends up kind of online stalking somebody that he had slept with previously that now has AIDS, and then he also ends up meeting this girl and following her message board kind of thing where you can post pictures and memes and writings and whatever. And so he ends up following her, and it's just kind of this sad story, but yeah, also really interesting. So really like that. Next one is House of Incest. This one is by, you told me how to pronounce her name, and now I don't remember how to pronounce it. Anais. Okay, so he did say that it was pronounced Anais, which is how the girl that I knew that had that same name, how she pronounced it, but I don't know how accurate that is. But anyways, this one was, again, another really interesting book. This is about a woman's kind of, or her kind of thinking about relationships and how the most powerful relationships are with yourself, but then that can also backfire as well. It is an interesting kind of stream of consciousness story, but there are some fantastic lines in there, tons to analyze. I'm really excited to read more of her work. Next up, we have Paradise Rot by Jenny Haval. What is my husband doing? He's trying to set the house on fire. This one is about two women's kind of relationship. So our first woman, what's her? Jo. She is an exchange student, so doesn't know anyone, doesn't really know the language, the culture, stuff like that, and she ends up having very surface level relationships with men. Like, any relationship she has with the men throughout this whole book, it's very just sexual to use her. It's not for anything, really for her own benefit. And then she meets a woman and ends up living with her. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's actually really interesting. The place that they live is a warehouse and there's not really walls. And so that's actually really interesting to sit and analyze as well, because there's not these dividers between the women. Like, they really do merge and become almost one being. And it's called Paradise Rot because their house becomes this like rotten ecosystem of mold and bugs. And yeah, there's some urine in here. It's a weird book. It's more like a surrealist fairy tale than anything, but man, did I really enjoy that one. I thought it was a blast to read. Next up here, we have Sarah Tantlinger's To Be Devoured. This was another one that was quite interesting, about two females who are dating and in a relationship, but our main character, oh, Andy, yes. But Andy does some weird things and it kind of creeps Luna out, and so Luna keeps pulling away from Andy, and I think the more she pulls away, because Andy's got a whole past, a whole slew of issues that she's working on, and the more that Luna pulls away, kind of the more she spirals. I mean, there's some weird gross stuff that happens in this book, so be prepared for that. I don't know if I would call it extreme horror, but there are some nasty scenes. Oh, but beautifully written. Next we have Maggie's Grave by David Sodergren. This one was really fun. It was about a small town in Scotland where a group of kids takes this American tourist to Maggie's grave. She really wants to see this witch that lived in this town before, and the town ended up murdering this witch. So she has a cabin on the top of a hill and then her gravesite. So they take the American up to her grave, and she comes back and just wreaks havoc on this town. This one gets very bloody, very violent. The way that the witch comes into the town, man, never read anything like that before. This book surprised me because I'm not big on supernatural stuff. I'm not really a big witch, ghost type person, but this book was gnarly and I enjoyed it, and I will read more of his work. Next up, I read The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. I always pronounce his name wrong. Ira. Anyways, this one, probably everybody knows the story about this man and a woman move to this town of Stepford, and the woman realizes that all the women kind of don't have personalities and they are just there to cook and clean, and that's it. And she's fearful that she's going to become one of them, and the story kind of continues on from there, like her trying to figure out what the heck is going on in this town. It's actually I read it quite differently than the movies. I think I will do a movie versus book on this one probably soon. I don't know if anybody cares, you know, because it's such an old movie, but I don't know, I thought it might be interesting to kind of sit and analyze because I think I feel differently about it than probably most people do. Next, we have The Cellar by Richard Lehman. This one surprised the crap out of me. So this is about a town or a house called Beast House. And supposedly in the past, this beast has come on multiple occasions and killed multiple people. And so now they kind of run a tour and they have these fake statues that show where the people were killed and what injuries that they had throughout the house. And then you have this woman who's running away from her ex-husband and bringing her daughter with her because her ex-husband did some terrible things to their daughter in a sexual manner. And then went to jail and now he's out of jail. So they end up at the beast house, the woman and the mother, while they're running away from the husband. And so you really have this interesting story of a human beast and a monster beast. And yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed this one. Super messed up. If you have any sensitivity, sexual stuff at all, stay far away from this book.
I was laying in bed last night and I thought, that's so weird. I didn't even say fuck Heathcliff once in that video. And then I realized I somehow forgot to put in Wuthering Heights. So this is by Emily Bronte. And the story is about a man who goes and rents a place to stay. His landlord is a man named Heathcliff. And while he's there, the maid or whomever she is, she tells him the whole story of Heathcliff's life and honestly why or how he's just a pile of dog shit. Fuck you, Heathcliff. I enjoyed this one a lot. Definitely different than anything I expected from the book, but it is told in kind of a strange way. So it's not my favorite classic book ever written, but I still really, really freaking enjoyed this book. So yeah, fuck you, Heathcliff. Okay, next.
Next up is Negative Space by B.R. Yeager. Loved this one. What an interesting ride. This is about this new drug on the market. It's making people either see things that aren't there or opening them up to see things that other people can't. This one is weird. We're dealing with other dimensions. There are so many people that are just taking their lives and there's forums written about it and people are wondering why they're doing it, and some people are relating it to this new drug. And then you have these three main characters who are all discussing this fourth character named Tyler. He's kind of the ringleader of them. This was a acid trip of a book and I loved it. Okay, so the next category is going to be easy, and I know what you're thinking. Come on, the cozy mysteries are not that high, but they are. I love these books. These are the Addison Moore Murder in the Mix series, and I've read this year 7 Layer Slayer, Red Velvet Vengeance, Lethal Lemon Bars, New York Cheesecake Chaos, Bloodbath and Banana Cakes, as well as Macaron Massacre. So these are written so that you can read them one per month. And so that's why I have read so many of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, because this is just until my June books, and then I'll do another one at the end of the year to do the July through December books. But anyway, these are so cute. They make me so happy. They're just about a girl, I'm sure you guys know because I talk about them every month, but they're just about a girl who sees a ghost of a pet. She knows that somebody will be murdered. Whoever is murdered, that pet was their favorite pet. She finds the body and then she has this unquenchable thirst for justice, so she ends up solving the crime always. You go with her to investigate the crimes, to interview people, and you also go with her on these crazy adventures to like strip clubs or these seedy areas of town or naked couples retreats. She's also in a love triangle with 2 hunky ex-stepbrothers. So I don't know, they're adorable. You can't make me not love these books, and I will not apologize for how much I love them. Okay, now my last category. These are my top tier favorite books of the year. These I rated all 5 stars. So this was so difficult to rate, put them in order. But the first one is Ronald Malfi's Small Town Horror. This one just came out. I freaking loved it. I loved this book. It was so fun. It was about a man who gets called back to the hometown that he grew up in. He has some friends there from when he was younger, but they have an awkward past, so they don't always get along. The main character, is his name Andrew? Yeah, Andrew. Andrew and his wife, before he leaves town, him and his wife are pregnant. And as soon as she gets pregnant, well, she's pregnant, you get what I'm saying. As soon as she gets pregnant, he starts feeling this presence around. And when he goes back to the town, it seems like his other friends are feeling the same presence. So he's revisiting old memories and how they became friends, why they're no longer friends, kind of things that played out from their past while still trying to deal with the things in his present. The ending of this book, oh, amazing. Next up, it was really hard between this one and like, come on, they're both great books. I don't know how to rate these, but this is Philip Fracasse's Boys in the Valley. This one blew me away. This was the first Philip Fracasse book that I read, and it was brilliant. It was so fucking fun. I can't tell you a time when I enjoyed a horror book more. Well, I guess I can because I enjoyed that one. You get what I'm saying. It's a great book. So this one is about a religious orphanage for boys. I think it's in the early 1900s. And you have different various characters in the book. So a lot of boys, they range in age. They go from like, I don't know, 8 to 16 or something like that. And we have one of the older boys who's our main character, so we get to see from his perspective, but we also get other perspectives too. This is another one where it's not demonizing religion, but it definitely is saying, kind of like that Camp Damascus one, that if you have people leading this religious group that have their own agenda, that it can be really dangerous. So you do have kind of that in there, but then you also have this man that comes to the orphanage, and he has occult symbols written all over his body. And when he ends up passing away, he unleashes this evil onto this orphanage. And it is so fun to read. I don't understand how this book was so fun. There was not one page that was boring to me. Okay, I was talking too much that my camera died, so I don't exactly know where I left off. But it's a gnarly book. It's so fun. It's bloody, it's gory, it's entertaining. There was not one page I was bored of reading. And then our main character Peter, also, he's kind of coming to age, and so you also have his story as well. He doesn't know if he wants to continue with his religion or if he wants to just be a normal boy and go with his desires of, you know, girls and things like that. So what a great book. This was a blast. It was a blast. That's actually my top horror book of the year now that I'm looking at it. So next I have Ian McEwan's The Cement Garden. This one was so good. It was so good. It's about 4 siblings, 2 boys and 2 girls. They lose both of their parents, and it's just kind of them trying to figure out the world without any guidance. It gets dark and fucked up, but there's a lot to analyze in this story. So much. I mean, even down to like how the surroundings mirror what they're going through, and how they don't want outsiders to come in, and what happens when they do allow an outsider in. It's a really interesting book. I loved this one. It's, yeah, kind of just like a snapshot of loss and how each of the siblings handles it differently. Kind of like Monstrilio as well. You definitely get that in there too, where you get to see how differently people react to losing someone they love. Next is The Sluts by Dennis Cooper. Come on, this is one of the best books ever freaking written, ever. I love this book. It is so messed up. Holy crap, is it messed up. There's some fudged up stuff in here, but it is so good. It's about this escort website where people rank gay male escorts, and there's this one escort named Brad, and everyone is just obsessed with him. He's really good looking. People get more and more interested as this lore of Brad untangles on the internet. You know how things are when something takes off and everybody has to get their 2 cents in, like, oh, I met him one time, and then it just turns into this crazy snowball of just the weirdest story of Brad. So anyways, what ends up happening is that nobody really knows who Brad is or what happened to him or what's going on. And I mean, talk about unreliable narrators. This book's got about 30 of them. It is so fun. It's also just interesting to read in 2024 about the internet, how you can't trust anything that's online. And then it's also definitely has some undertones of the AIDS epidemic and things like that, and losing gay men, and I definitely think that there's more to the story than just the blood and the guts. But man, is this a fantastic read. It's dark, it's gross, it is fudged up, but it is fun. It's a great book. And it's not told in a normal writing style. It's told through forums and that escort service website. So it's not told in your traditional manner, and that makes it even more fun. Next up, my friends, Skag Boys by Irvin Welsh. Are you sick of hearing me talk about this book yet? Because This is one of the best books ever. It's fantastic. It is the funniest book I have ever read, but it's also really freaking heartbreaking. This is the prequel to Trainspotting, so you get to just see these characters growing up. You have Mark Renton, and then you also have Sick Boy, and you have Begbie, and a bunch of other characters. And it's just their descent into addiction and what led to it. Wow, this is such a great book. Heartbreaking, fantastic, amazing, loved it, loved every second. And number one on my list is The Necrophiliac by Gabrielle Whitcock. I loved this book so much. This was, yeah, I guess my best book of the year. It's hard, you know, because like these are all 5-star reads. I read so many great books this year, but this one got to me. I love really messed up books that are written very beautifully, and that is exactly what this book encompasses. It's about a man who learns of his mother's death while he is pleasuring himself. So he, from that point forward, relates those two things. So he ends up becoming a necrophiliac. It's written in journal format, so you only get his perspective. He's definitely a misanthrope. He does not like people. He likes to be out on his own. And I think that also being a necrophiliac is his defense mechanism against becoming close to someone and losing them, like with his mother, because they're already dead, so he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. This book is so interesting to analyze. I am telling you, there is so much here. I mean, I already want to reread this again. This book was so freaking good. It's messed up, it's dark, you know, but a fantastic read. It really is great. And I have videos on all of these books, so if you want to deeper dive into any of these, you could just search it and it'll come up, because yeah, I analyzed the crap out of that one. I'll leave that one linked down below too. Or you know what? I'm just gonna leave it, just listen to me talk for 10 more seconds, and then I'll leave it at the end so you guys can watch what I have to say about that guy. It's not that I give anything away, so you can definitely read it or watch that video and then read it for yourself. Anyways, guys, that's my ranking of every book that I've read this year, minus the thriller books. If you would like to see my ranking of all the thriller books, just go back a video and it'll be right there for you. Anyways, let me know what you guys feel about these. Let me know your ranking, your top books that you've read this year. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.